So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome today's first speaker, Natalie Lacey, Executive Vice President with Ipsos's Media and Entertainment Service Line. Natalie, you have the floor.
Great, and thank you, Ellen, and thank you to everyone who's here today. I'm just going to take a few minutes and introduce your speakers from around Ipsos and around the world. I'm going to be your host for today, and I will come back at the end of the presentation and read and take your questions and share those out with the team. I'm joined today by Chris Hoffman, who's a Senior Vice President in the Ipsos Media and Entertainment Platforms Group, based in LA, and as you can see, we've shared our favorite games for each of us across the screen. We also have Matin, who is joining us from Generation Lab, a company that actually executed this research and an expert on targeting this generation. We have Eduardo, who's joining us from the UK. Thank you, Eduardo, for being here today and joining us from the media team in London. And finally, Andrew, who is a Vice President with Ipsos Synthesio, is joining us from New York and is going to share with us our social insights. On that, I'd like for each of you to talk a little bit about the data and sources that we're going to review today, and then we'll get right into it. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. Just to kind of start off, I'll say a little bit about Generation Lab and the data that we have today. We're a polling and research company based in Washington, D.C., focused solely on young people. And so this was a very exciting opportunity to work with the great minds at Ipsos on this project. Some of the results that you'll be seeing today was a study we conducted at the end of August and early September among 841 gamers who, at least play 1 hour per week, ages 13 through 34. Obviously, the data was weighted to reflect the broader population of gamers, and excited to delve in. So I'll pass it on to Eduardo.
Thank you, Martin. And from the European side, we got the who, the what, and the trend, and we wrote that by GameTrack. We got a strong knowledge of the video game market and video game ecosystem, and we have demonstrated that tracking how this strong ecosystem performs in the main European 5 countries since 2011. And we do this by intensively running surveys, online surveys and offline surveys, but also merging sales data. And we provide single touch points for the who, the how engage, and what do they mean for the overall video game industry at overall level. Also, we bring the context, the unknown and the unknown unknowns, and what drives those conversations from Ipsos Synthesio, where we actually have the capability to enrich our findings with contents and basically using online freely conversation from gamers, where they chat about the gaming ecosystem, they share the feelings, expectations, but also most importantly, what they think about the monetization perceptions. And we bring all these three to provide a 360-degree insights from the gamers and gaming communities. So on a nutshell, this is what we have done, and I pass it on to you, Chris.
Thanks for that, Eduardo. So we're going to cover 4 topics today. We'll go through them quickly here. First, we'll start with the gaming community and what being a part of the community means to gamers. We'll talk about the pervasiveness of monetization and monetization opportunities among 13 to 34 gamers. We'll take a look at the state of the industry, where the category is doing well and where some improvements can be made. And we'll close with a glimpse into the future. So to start, we'll take a look at the gaming community. One thing that we found in this research is gaming takes up a significant portion of the lives of gamers aged 13 to 34. On average, almost half are playing 2 or more hours a day. So if you think of a full week, you're sleeping for 8 hours a day, school, homework or work for about 8 hours each weekday. When you factor that in, we learned that this younger cohort is gaming for almost 20% of their free time throughout the week. So we know that gaming is a critical factor from a time spent perspective for these 13 to 34s. So from a media perspective, what else would they do? Well, we see that half of casual gamers are going to the movies, but this figure falls under 40% among the heaviest gamers. The heaviest gamers are those that are gaming for 28 hours a week or more. The significant majority of the casual gamers are also watching TV movies on streaming services, but this is down to only 2/3 among those who are gaming 15 hours a week or more. We found this to be somewhat surprising, given that as we look at the industry overall, we see, Netflix has bounced back from a subscriber perspective and slowed their subscriber declines. Max is rebranded from HBO Max. There's a ton of popular and buzzworthy TV and theatrical content out there. So there's a lot of other options from an entertainment perspective. So it's interesting to look at this from the gaming perspective. So we know that heavy gamers are gaming frequently. They're consuming streaming content less than others in their age group. They go to the movies less frequently. So what else can we learn about the connection gamers have with the gaming category? Across the research our team's done, we're constantly hearing about the need states that are critical for this younger generation. The need for connection to others, either in person or online, the sense of belonging. So this led to our desire to dive into gaming communities. What we see is that well more than half of these younger gamers do feel like they are part of a gaming community. But something interesting, and this is likely a driver of this increasing engagement with gaming, is that more than 80% of the heaviest gamers, those who are gaming 28 hours a week or more, feel connected to a gaming community. So among these heaviest gamers, the feeling or the communal connection they have with the broader community is near universal. So what happens in these communities? Why are they so popular? Why are they so resonant? The top two activities are tied to social connection, either talking about video games or playing video games with friends or even people they don't know. 3 in 5, 13 to 34 gamers engage with gaming communities via these tentacles of social connection. Sticking with the theme of social connection, shared interest communities is an engagement driver for nearly half of these younger gamers, providing a sense of belonging and connection with the like-minded people. And of course, for this digital-first generation, watching and commenting on videos is a shared experience, deepening the connection that these gamers have with the broader community. At Ipsos, we strongly believe in the power of global data and having a global viewpoint. So here, as Eduardo mentioned up top, we pulled in some data that we've from some work we've done with Video Games Europe across the EU 5 countries, UK, France, Germany, Spain, and Italy. The benefits we see from gaming in these 5 European markets are similar to what we see in the United States. There's a desire for social connection, a desire for interactivity. There's also a desire for strong digital communities to have broad appeal, which drives engagement and interactivity. And like in the US, many of these consumers prefer video games to other entertainment media outlets. So if you think of the needs for connection, the needs for belonging and community for the younger generation, we're seeing consistent themes across both the US and Europe. Now over to Eduardo.
Thank you, Chris. And definitely very interesting insights and monetization, possibly one of the main issues of the webinar, and possibly the bread and butter after highlighting the strong engagement and community feeling from gamers to the video game ecosystem. Actually, what we would like to answer and some of the key topics is how active are the gamers in terms of the acquisition of video games and what is kind of the digitalization progress that we have seen within the gamer in the US and across the Atlantic. Firstly, as we just see in the screen, claim spend on video games is very pervasive among the US 13 to 34 gamers, with strong signs for a massive opportunity in terms of financial and enrichment of this category. 85% have paid for gaming content across the multiple and very different variables formats of video games within the past 6 months. So this means that most of the gamers on this age invest in the category, and only 15% they claim that they haven't spent any money at all, or they haven't get in touch with any monetization point for the video game category in the past 6 months. It's not only about investing in video games, ubiquitous amongst these gamers in the US, but it's also how spending across multiple monetization points is also very strong. And you can see as we move to the right is the amount of touch points that gamers use to engage and monetize, with nearly 2 in 5, 38%, who have paid for gaming content with at least 3 monetization touch points. And 1 in 10 have done so with at least 6 or 5 monetization points. This numerous set of touch points amplify monetization, but also creates a complex field to navigate to establish your IP, your game, within this very selective gaming audience. Then we move to the next one. Second point, and you can see across the top, is the 7 key touch points where video games are available across many different formats. Most of them are digital. And if you move from top to the bottom, is the level of engagement of the video game players that we saw 13 to 44 in the US. And actually, one of the key points is the more you play, the more likely you are to engage with any monetization touch point within this more digitalized gaming ecosystem, and particularly in the US. With players who play at less than 7 hours per week, an average of 1 hour per day, are less likely to pay for video game content, with some of the incidences like 23% claim that they have purchased a digital copy, and sometimes some of those less than 1 in 10 have claimed to get any monetization touch point available within the video game category. Players who play more than 7 hours per week engage deeper with video games, and consequently, their monetization touch points jump across various distribution channels. These younger core gamers, that is the highlighted blue line there that we see, are leading the migration from physical to digital game acquisition, with nearly half of them purchasing full game downloads versus only a quarter purchasing a physical game. Also, these core gamers are more likely to subscribe to on-demand streaming services such as Xbox Game Pass, PlayStation services, and Nintendo Online at 44%, because they find value in this new series of these new services to access games without any owning, but also, despite the usual technical glitches, but also advantages of having a very large library of games to enjoy. Finally, and also very important, is the component of in-game transactions that we see within this digital ecosystem, with these core gamers actually boosting the gaming experience via microtransactions, to either to extend the preferred video game, to add new missions, wars, via expansions or digital passes, or to subscribe to long-term self-contained games such as World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy. All these just demonstrate a willingness to invest on gaming as part of their entertainment repertoire to access content, features, discounts, pre-sales. And all that comes from the full gaming ecosystem. 25 years ago, the only way to access and to purchase a game, it was just a physical copy. Right now, there are multiple digital touch points. And actually, the younger gamers just embrace these digitalized channels. Something that we see, and Chris, if we move to the next one, is we found exactly the same similarity within the European 13 to 34 players. And we see comparable levels of engagement with gaming across the Europe 5 markets. Across the full population aged 13 to 34, 7 in 10 play video games or app games across any device. And this takes to nearly 9 in 10 amongst the younger, the teenagers, 13 to 17, and drops, but not drops massively amongst the adult population, 30 to 34, with nearly 3 in 5 playing video games. And it's not only about the gamer numbers that they represent, but it's the depth in which they engage with the full ecosystem. These gamers play for an average of 12.2 hours per week. And half of these European 13 to 34 players are also labeled as core gamers. They play for at least 7 hours per week. These define similarities across the Atlantic, but also another big difference. The US core gamers, as Chris just said, represents around 75% of the US gamers from this age. At the European level, they represent around 51%, as we just see in this screen. But despite those differences, these gamers are as digitalized as the US gamers. And if we move to the next slide, these 71% of population represent around 56 million players across the European 5 markets who play and engage with the ecosystem around 12 hours. And because of this high level of numbers and engagement that is within this key gaming audience, they drive around 67% of the overall revenue generated by video game sales in 2022. What does that mean? An average gamer invests on gaming an excess of $200, and out of those, a strong 84% of this revenue generated is generated by digital formats, all these full game downloads, microtransactions through consoles, PC, smartphone, and app games. Yes, there is still a strong 16% invested on physical games, which actually is stable over time, and we have seen during the last 12, 13 years that we have been running this study. However, growth of the full ecosystem is driven by digital formats and the diversification we have seen across this digital monetization touchpoint. It is important to mention that this diversification is valued by these gamers as they can customize, enhance, and expand their video game audience. And something that is very important is as this proliferation happens, the digitalization of this model, we need to understand also how the video game industry control those different channels. And with GameTrack, we have conducted studies to assess the level of understanding and control measures established by parents of gaming children regarding the levels of in-game spending particularly. From these studies, we know that around 3/4 of parents, they claim their kids do not spend money within in-game currently, which means that 18% who have kids who spend money in-game activity. And amongst that, the most important thing is to assess the control mechanisms used by parents to control this in-game spending. Again, around 3/4, 76% of these parents with kids who engage with in-game spending say that they have preconceived agreements with their kids, either asking permission to spend or setting spending limits at overall level. And also parents use other technical tools such as parental controls on gaming devices, prepaid cards, push notification, two-factor authentication, and also monitoring credit card transactions, which is a provision that we used to have. The relevant importance of this point in particular is as video game developers increase their games engagement to generate effective and more efficient monetization opportunities, the video game industry should also commit to educate and measure their audience understanding and usage. In this case, parents of children to ensure the required balance between satisfaction and protection of the gamers meet the expectations. And with this quick summary, I just pass to Andrew to give you more insights about the gamers online chatter.
Right, thanks, Eduardo. So as Eduardo spoke to earlier, core gamers are purchasing digital, but why? What's driving this behavior? Well, we analyzed millions of social posts from gamers across social forums, blogs, and other online sources. And we looked at those discussing purchasing physical copies from retailers like GameStop. And we also looked at those discussing the purchase of digital copies on platforms like Steam or Epic Games. Now, when we collected the data, we then used generative AI and machine learning techniques to apply an outcome-defined lens to surface some of the most discussed motivations for purchasing digital copies of games. We then validated these and we ranked the motivations based on their prominence. Now, somewhat unsurprisingly, the convenience of purchasing digital copies and the ability to preload these in order to play them immediately upon release were the most prominent motivations. However, the inclusion of motivations such as the need for less physical storage space and the environmental benefits being in the top 5 motivations that we discovered, point to wider societal trends, things like environmentally conscious consumerism and this impacting gamer purchasing decisions. Next slide, please, Chris. So, whilst gamers are undoubtedly going digital, the debate surrounding true game ownership remains hotly contested. And, it really underpins the digital versus physical conversation when we looked into it. And, this debate around true ownership, this is a topic that's growing by 22% in the last 12 months on social. And we also observed a 25% increase in Google searches for game ownership. And, the game ownership topic, it's a polarizing one. In the community, some gamers stated that they would forego true ownership for convenience. Others avoid digital platforms due to the lack of true ownership and, also the nostalgia associated with purchasing a digital copy. And some even suggested that purchasing a physical copy doesn't constitute true ownership of the game anyway. So whilst the gaming community is, like I say, undoubtedly going digital with their purchases, there is still a cohort of gamers buying physical, and that's, driven by true ownership of the game, but also that sense of nostalgia that comes with it. So I'm going to hand you back to Chris to discuss the state of the industry.
Super interesting. Thank you for that, Andrew. So we're going to shift gears a bit here and discuss about how gamers are perceiving the video game industry at large. So far we've heard about the various positives about gaming, from sense of community to social connection. The impact of gaming is clearly profound, with 6 in 10 13 to 34 gamers reporting that video gaming has had a positive impact on their lives. And for those with a deeper connection to video games, be it those who feel like they're part of a community, the heaviest gamers, the feelings of positivity are even stronger. So we've spoken a bit about how video games impact the lives of consumers and why gamers gravitate toward gaming in the first place. We thought it'd be interesting to explore how these younger gamers think about the industry at large. Positively, for the category, the majority of gamers believe that the gaming industry itself just wants them to have fun. However, there are areas where the industry does struggle with some weaker perceptions. Generally, fewer than a third of gamers feel that the industry is diverse, is inclusive, responds to consumer or player feedback, or cares about its players. So while yes, fun is at the forefront, which is positive for both consumers and the category at large, there is an opportunity to address some of these perceptual challenges. And to take this a bit further, younger gamers do not feel that the industry is currently being proactive enough. A small percentage feel that the industry is taking enough action to tackle the negativity in the industry related to toxicity, racism, or sexual harassment. The vast majority see this as an area where there's work to be done in terms of action and perceptions. So with gaming increasingly woven into the fabric of society and popular culture, it's more important than ever for the gaming industry to take a position on the issues that are impacting our society at large. We find that there's a real opportunity for the industry and the various companies that make up this great industry to take a stand and make it clear that the industry is taking proactive steps to tackle some of these issues that are negatively impacting our society. So much can be done here in terms of both taking tangible steps towards addressing these societal ills within gaming and communicating that to the players.
So thanks, Chris. Yeah, we wanted to understand whether these survey findings are reflected in the audience's digital behavior. So we analyzed online behavioral data to understand the digital body language and profile of gamers aged 13 to 34. So we analyzed a total of 36 million gamers in this target audience against a Gen Pop audience of around 246 million people. And, whilst we can surface granular information like their favorite games, their favorite game types, we really focus on the social, political, and environmental interests of this audience. And what we found was that the young gaming community is one that cares. 45% of the 36 million gamers that we analyzed showed an active interest in social issues online, and 20% have an active interest in community issues. And we were able to dig into some of the specific social and environmental causes that they care about, with the audience showing distinct affinities for the natural environment, renewable energy, and social change. So the audience profiling that we did with this behavioral data showed us that, even outside of the gaming community, young gamers care about and are actively engaging with social, environmental, and political issues. So what can the industry be doing to help? I'm sure we're all aware that there's been some negativity expressed in the media around gaming culture. However, gamers are taking a proactive approach to these issues. They're discussing the cultural needs in great detail, and they're making suggestions on how the industry can help empower gamers, promote inclusivity, and combat toxicity. So again, we use generative AI techniques, this time with an unmet needs insight lens, to uncover some of the top cultural needs and gamer suggestions present in the online conversation. And some of the most prominent needs we uncovered were around empowering women in gaming. We saw female gamers suggesting that promoting inclusivity, representation, education, networking, advocacy, and mentorship for women was a way that the industry could evolve. We also discovered, inclusivity for transgender gamers being a prominent need. And, a really simple example of a functionality change to allow transgender gamers to remove their dead names from accounts can be a facilitator for inclusivity. And then finally, gamers discussed the need for developers and studios to be doing more to combat toxicity. And, some of the suggestions that we uncovered in the data was, this need for more in-game customization options to reflect the diversity of the gaming community and to promote connection. So with all those suggestions said, I'm going to hand you back to Chris to talk through what the future of gaming holds.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andrew. So yeah, with an eye towards the future, a couple points that we think collectively are really important. So we expect that video gaming will continue to be embedded in the daily lives of gamers across the board, from casual players to the heaviest players. Gaming will continue to be more immersive, feel more experiential, and its place within the overall media suite is only going to continue to grow. And we also think that the role of gaming communities will become stronger, and these communities will even more closely reflect the happenings and issues that our broader society is facing, both on the good side and the bad.
I think from my point of view, also is looking at, despite the fact that the gamers actually acknowledge the positive and how the overall video game ecosystem support them and the community feeling is very important for them. It's also, there are opportunities with the video game industry as to spread and cool strength actions and associate possibilities to measure and increase the protection of their players. And I think we have seen, obviously, the news are actually that the ones that are coming to the negative, never about the positive when we're talking about video games. But apart from the positive, like how this association with the negative can actually be measured and actually embrace the awareness and education of gamers, how to avoid those, but also fighting those negative aspects. Gamers are also very varied in the playing. It should be very varied in the making. One of the points that I touched is very important, and is how parents could actually give more control, tools, knowledge about how control and responsibly ensure their kids' safety with the video games. And that's actually quite important. And myself, I'm a parent of an 11-year-old girl who is discovering and enjoying video games, but also struggle to go about the parental controls, how, when is she playing by herself. And I try to be all the gaming time with her, but it's also how we can improve that knowledge of the tools and how that access to these tools to have a little bit more control about these possible adversities. Something that is also part of the monetization is gaming is an economic growth that we have seen and will remain a strong economic engine within the entertainment industry. Is focus their attention on how to satisfy the expectation of the gamers, but increasingly is the increase and what is growing is the appeal to advertising and brands. And I think these are key topics that I found myself. And Andrew, you got some points as well, I imagine.
Yeah, so I think when we're looking to the future and with the social data, when we were looking through it, what was very apparent is that gamers, more so than any audience, I think, are extremely vocal online. They go into granular detail about the games themselves, but they're also talking about these wider issues and how the industry can fulfill their needs and their expectations. And listening to conversations about the industry beyond just the games themselves is really important in understanding how we can address some of those expectations for the gaming community. And I think the other, economic factor here is that, gaming platforms will continue to remain a strong engine for economic growth. And, this appeal goes beyond gaming products themselves. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen some of the collaborations and the products that are out there that are specifically targeting gamers, but aren't necessarily gaming products themselves. So, yeah, I think the listening to them and being aware that, that we can diversify in terms of the products that we're putting in front of gamers is an important point.
Well, thank you to the panelists and for all of the interesting insights and points of discussion. We have had several questions come in, so I'm going to see if I can assess who might be most appropriate to respond to each. So let me take a look. The first question is actually one about how we access and study this audience, and maybe Martin, that would be a good place for Generation Lab to comment. How can we actually study this younger audience effectively, and maybe some guidelines that you might recommend from your experience with Gen Lab?
Absolutely. No, thank you, Natalie. I think one thing that is key, and I think is very well highlighted by this webinar, is that we need to meet them where they are. So, they're spending a lot more of their time on their phones, on social media, on platforms like in gaming environments. So really need to figure out ways to meet them there and kind of engage them in those places. I also think we need to be very dynamic in terms of, that platforms are changing. We're experiencing more AR and VR platforms coming into play. So we need to be able to stay ahead of that and see that, kind of be able to reach folks there before, ahead of the time when they migrate. And I think I love all the kind of the points that Eduardo and Andrew and Chris brought up. Doing more social listening, doing more kind of original research that are kind of platform agnostic. I think those are all great ways to engage them and make sure we're listening to them. So, thank you.
Great, it's really helpful. Maybe I'll continue on sort of the how we access and the technology side. Andrew, you mentioned the use of Gen AI in the social research and the millions of posts that you analyzed. But the question here is, how would you be looking at or accessing open source tools such as ChatGPT?
Yeah, so we don't actually use a ChatGPT. When I talk to generative AI, what we've created is a proprietary module within the Synthesio platform. So unlike some of the open source stuff like ChatGPT, we have actually created a system that uses the data that exists within our data corpus. So, it's not this black box where we don't know where the insight's coming from. It's grounded in consumer conversation. And then we've done a whole bunch of prompt engineering to look at specific insight lenses. So, I mentioned a couple during the presentation, like looking at motivations or need states or unmet needs. So we've done that layers on to the data that exists within the corpus. And then all of the insights are actually connected to gamer conversations.
right? So quite custom and specialized in terms of the services and data that's delivered. Eduardo, you mentioned, I think this one's for you, given the conversations and the data you shared with us about monetization and spending, but also those trends between digital and package. And the question here is around the future of gaming and revenue. What's your point of view? Is it fully digital, with package now accounting for a relatively small proportion of what we saw, or the trend even downward? Is this the end of physical games? Maybe you could comment on that question and provide some insight there.
The market is moving there, and it's been embraced by all these different touch points. And even the hardware right now, you can see like consoles are just having digital only versions. But also, I think there is some insights, even from the survey here, but also from the European, that is it's a little about the age component of the player base, like when younger, still engaging with physical games, but in a lower state of incidence. And I think the older range, those who are 30 or 34, tend to engage or have a higher incidence. I think in the US, we got the younger around 15 and the older around double that in terms of purchasing physical games. It's not only that it's not old-fashioned, but it's about the audience component. Like there is definitely component within the gamer and those pockets who are collectors and they want to have the physical. They actually have and label the pride on every single game that they have finished the hours played. And actually something that Andrew highlighted quite good with the other analysis of dimensions about the true ownership. First, true ownership, but also there is second-hand market that is also appreciated by the players. They finish, they buy, and they actually interchange games on the go. And yeah, like we have seen evolution for the European. Yes, we have seen that video game sales for the physical just has decreased, but just slightly over all the years that, particularly in the last 5 years. But growth is fully digital. So then the growth and what I expect for the future is physical still being the first step, but digital is driving engagement and growth to the overall video game ecosystem.
So maybe different purposes for each.
Yeah.
Different expectations and emotional connections. It's, I guess, a little bit like digital music and the return to vinyl and LPs, right? Exactly.
Like I'm old school. I love, and also control is another very important point. Like as a parent, I'd rather to give this to my daughter instead of just allowing her to go to a digital place to download any game that she wants. Is an instrument of control as well to parents.
Interesting. Well, talking about that, we have another question here about the gaming industry. I think, Chris, you covered some of that data here. So maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the ways that the gaming industry could promote the steps that they are taking to address some of the challenges that you revealed in the survey and in the data within that gaming ecosystem.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting, and this kind of harkens back to something that Eduardo was talking about, where, especially from like a parent lens, the toolkit is there, but often consumers don't know exactly how to use the toolkit or what's in the toolkit. So, we were kind of discussing and thinking that this is something that it's really hard for individual companies to do because the parental controls are going to vary wildly from company A to B to C. So it's really about kind of positioning this and communicating to gamers industry-wide that yes, the industry does have these tools in place to protect its users and its consumers, and just kind of educating them how they can do it. And also, when we think of the popularity of live streaming, for example, there is an opportunity for the gaming industry to maybe partner with the largest streamers, the largest creators, to help kind of get the information about the toolkit out there. Instead of me as a consumer, I got an email the other day from a gaming company that talked about the parental controls, but I would imagine that most people that got that email probably just glossed over it or maybe even deleted it without opening. But if it was a campaign that was on TikTok or Reddit or even some posts on Discord, meeting people where the gamers are at, that's something that can be used to really effectively position this to the industry.
Well, it's almost full circle back to how Matan talked about researching this audience. So, and we certainly have seen the rise of creators and influencers in many different spheres. So it's interesting to raise it here as we talked about such an engaged audience. So I think that actually concludes the questions that came in. Of course, we're always open to any others, and if people want to check in, but I'm going to hand over to Ellen as we approach the time here to wrap up.
Wow, thank you so much, Natalie and Mateen and Christopher, Eduardo, and Andrew for today's really interesting presentation. Thank you all for joining us. If you do have any follow-up questions, please contact us directly. In the meantime, do expect a link to today's recorded presentation to come sometime later this week. That now concludes today's amazing webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.